Sony revealed the complete list of games for the upcoming PlayStation Classic, the full 20, and unfortunately, it's a little disappointing. What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Meek, the Uber Geek. Welcome to Pretty Dece, your daily entertainment and pop culture show. The PlayStation Classic comes out December 3rd, and yes, we do have the full list of games. We knew 5 of them before, now we know the full 20. The full list is as follows: Battle Arena Toshinden, Cold Wars 2, Destruction Derby, Final Fantasy VII, Grand Theft Auto, the first one, Intelligent Cube, Jumping Flash, Metal Gear Solid, Mr. Driller, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, Rayman, Resident Evil Director's Cut, Revelations Persona, the first Persona game, Ridge Racer Type 4, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Siphon Filter, Tekken 3, Twisted Metal, Wild Arms, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. So that is a big list of games, and yes, it does include some really great games, some games that are very iconic, that are just kind of defining for the PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid is a game that is an absolute must include for a system like this. Metal Gear Solid, the first Metal Gear Solid, is kind of this like genre game defining, system defining game. When you think of MGS1, you think of the PS1. They're very closely tied together. So that's a great addition. Final Fantasy VII is an absolutely fantastic addition as far as an RPG that defines this system for a Western audience. An RPG that got a ton of people into Japanese role-playing games in general. Kind of had to be on the list, and that was one that we knew about. Even games like Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, that was a huge game on the PS1. It makes a lot of sense here, has a ton of fans, and is like a very unique game that brings to mind some of the fun you had on the PS1 when you first had this system all those years ago. But then we have some other games that are a bit more of a head scratcher as to why they're on the list. Rainbow Six is the #1 head scratcher for me out of all of these games. The PS1 version of the original Rainbow Six was absolutely terrible. Even at the time, the game was kind of unplayable. The PC version wasn't too bad, but really Rainbow Six is a series that really came into its own through further iterations of the series. So the first one wasn't that great, but as we've moved on, they keep getting better and better. So it's weird to include the first one as like it's some big, huge kind of watershed moment in gaming. It certainly wasn't, especially on the PS1. And that's kind of a similar complaint for some other things that are on this list. We get the first Twisted Metal, which is a great game, and Twisted Metal needs to be represented on this console, because again, it really defined this genre and is kind of synonymous with the PS1. But Twisted Metal 1 is not the game that everyone remembers when they think about Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal 2 is really the PS1 game that kind of made Twisted Metal what it is. It takes all the concepts of the first one, improves upon them, and builds on them. So it's weird to get the first Twisted Metal, but not the second. Same for Resident Evil. The second one is the one that is kind of more highly regarded, and we're only getting the first iteration. And even a game like Destruction Derby. I don't think Destruction Derby should have made the list of 20 at all, but the first one certainly shouldn't have. The second iteration of Destruction Derby is generally a better game, also came out on the PS1. No reason that we needed the first one over the second one. So very weird. They clearly were trying to pluck a single game from certain genres instead of doubling up on a single series. But it's weird that we get some of the not as good versions in games like Twisted Metal. We also have a real glaring issue in the games that aren't on the list, things that didn't make the cut. We talked about some of these when we first talked about the system as it was announced, but just to reiterate, there's no Crash Bandicoot game on this list. Crash Bandicoot, of course, one of the biggest games to come out on the PS1, a series that probably sold more games, sold more PS1 consoles than any other franchise, not represented here. No Spyro the Dragon, again, another series that sold a ton of consoles, really defined the PS1 for a ton of people, is not here. Now, those two series, Crash already has a remaster out on PS4, Spyro has one coming out very soon, so those were likely not included, so they don't step on the toes of the remastered versions, which is kind of a bummer. You would really kind of want those in both places, and the remaster scratches a certain itch, and the original unchanged version here on this cool little retro console scratches at a completely different itch for people. So it's a bummer that we couldn't have both. And then further from there, we don't have any Symphony of the Night. Castlevania was really kind of creating a genre of games that is incredibly popular. Even today, nothing there. We don't have any Tony Hawk, we don't have any Tomb Raider. Now, obviously there's going to be some licensing issues with some of those games. They didn't go out to Activision and get the rights to Tony Hawk, for example. But I wish they would have, you know? The big thing about the PS1 was really the rise of third-party developers. Third parties had been around for a while, but the PS1 is really where they started to kind of blossom, and where they started to fill out a console's library in a way where they were putting out some of the best games. And I think that's really apparent here, where we're missing some huge chunks of awesome games for the PS1 because we didn't reach out to every single publisher to pull in all of these third-party games. So it's kind of a bummer that this is our general list of games. There's a lot that I do want to play. I still think it's a pretty cool little device, but it could have been so much more than what this final list of 20 ends up actually being. Now, interestingly, the Japanese version has a different collection of games. It's got some overlap, but it is a little bit different, and it's kind of more appealing to me. It makes me wish that I spoke fluent Japanese, because it leans more heavily into the role-playing games. Of course, the Japanese audience is much bigger into RPGs, so they include several more role-playing games that would be great to have on our version. And it also leans kind of heavily, and it includes a couple of side-scrolling shooters, which is a genre that the Western audience really has no interest in whatsoever, but I love. So it gets a copy of G Darius and of Gradius Gaiden, which are both fantastic games, very overlooked, that are really fun to play if you like the genre of side-scrolling shooters. Those are both on the Japanese version of the console. So sadly at this point, I'm wondering if I actually need one of these. I do think the little device is cool looking, but I don't know that I necessarily want this core set of games. And I certainly am kind of bummed that, for example, I can play through Resident Evil, but then I can never move on to the second one because there's going to be no way to kind of add extra games to this thing. So the 20 games that are here are very, very hindering. So whether that is a list of 20 that you're into or not should determine whether you end up purchasing this device or not. So that's going to do it for Pretty Dece for today. Thank you very much for joining me to talk about the kind of lackluster 20 games that the PlayStation Classic is getting. If you would like to support Pretty Dece, you can do so. Visit prettydeceshow.com/listener support to find out all of those details. Of course, you can listen to the podcast in audio form. Just download it from your favorite podcast delivery platform or watch the video version of this show. You can find that on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/prettydece to find the channel. And finally, hit me up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @PrettyDeceShow.